Mm. I couldn't go to my brother's wedding. Not because I had somewhere else to be. Not because of a flight I couldn't change or a conflict I couldn't move around. I was told, very politely, very casually, the way you tell someone the restaurant changed its hours, that there wasn't enough room. I remember sitting in my car after that phone call, engine off, staring at the garage door. I didn't cry, I just kept thinking about the check I'd written 3 weeks earlier. The one my mother asked me to make out to the catering company directly because, she said, it was easier that way. $12,000. I wrote it without hesitating. My name is Maya. I'm 31. I'm a CPA at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and for most of my adult life, I have been the person in my family who handled things. Not because anyone asked me to in the beginning. It started small, the way these things always do. I was 23 when my father's hours got cut at the plant. I was fresh out of college, 2 months into my first real job, sharing a studio apartment with a girl from work. My mother called and said they were short on the mortgage that month. Just that month, she said. Just this once. I sent $700. The next month she called again. And the month after that. By the time I was 25, I had moved into a slightly bigger apartment and quietly accepted that a portion of my paycheck every month belonged to a house I didn't live in. My brother Danny was 4 years younger than me. He had our mother's eyes and our father's talent for making everything someone else's problem. He went to community college for 2 semesters, dropped out, worked a series of jobs that never lasted more than 8 months, and somewhere along the way became the family project. My parents talked about him the way people talk about a renovation that's almost done, always almost done, always needing just a little more. I paid for his EMT certification course when he was 22, $3,000. He completed it, worked at a clinic for about a year, then quit because of the hours. I didn't say anything about the $3,000. I told myself it was an investment in his future. That's the word I used in my head. Investment. Like I was a silent partner in a business that never opened. When Danny met Stephanie, things shifted a little. She was organized and sharp, and I liked her immediately, which surprised me because I had stopped liking most things that cost me energy. She seemed to stabilize him. He got a job in logistics. Kept it. They moved in together into an apartment about 20 minutes from my parents' house in Gastonia. My mother started calling less about the mortgage and more about Danny. How well he was doing. How mature he'd become. How Stephanie was so good for him. I was happy for him. I genuinely was. I was also quietly paying my parents' property taxes that year because they'd fallen behind. But I was happy for him. They got engaged in the fall. My mother called me before she called anyone else. Or at least she said she did. She was crying, the happy kind. And she said, "Maya, your brother proposed." And I sat in my office with the door closed and felt something warm move through me that I hadn't felt in a while. I said, "Mom, that's wonderful." She said, "We're thinking spring. We want something nice. You know how Stephanie's family is." I knew what that meant. Over the next few months, I became the unofficial financial coordinator of a wedding I was planning to attend as a guest. I helped research venues. I went with my mother to a tasting at a catering company in South Park. I spent 3 Saturdays helping Stephanie's mother compare floral arrangements online because she didn't know how to work the vendor websites. And I wrote checks. Not all at once. Piece by piece, the way you don't notice water rising when it's coming in slow. The venue deposit, $4,000, because they needed it by a certain date and my parents didn't have it liquid. The catering partial payment, $12,000, made out directly to the company. 2 bridesmaid dresses for cousins on my mother's side who couldn't afford them, $600. Rehearsal dinner contribution, $2,000. I was not asked to be a bridesmaid. I told myself Stephanie had her own people and that was fine. I was the sister of the groom. I'd be at the family table. That was fine. I found out about the seating situation in March, about 6 weeks before the wedding. My mother called on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner, just pasta and whatever vegetables I had left, and she started the conversation the way she always did when there was something uncomfortable coming. She asked about my job first. "How's work?" she said. "Are they keeping you busy?" I said yes, work was fine. She said, "There's something I need to talk to you about, and I need you to understand it's not personal." I turned the burner off. She explained that the venue had a capacity that was tighter than they expected, and that between Stephanie's family, who was large, and the people from Danny's job and the extended family on our side, the numbers just didn't work out. I said, "Mom," she said, "it's a seating issue, Maya. It's not about you." I asked her how many people were coming. She said around 140. I asked where exactly the capacity issue was. She said the venue held 145 and it was just very tight. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was looking at my pasta on the stove, steam still coming off it, and I was doing math in my head the way I do when something doesn't add up in a client's file. 140 guests, a venue that holds 145, and no seat for the person who paid for the venue deposit. I said, "I see." My mother said, "You're so understanding, Maya. I knew you'd get it." I said, "Of course." I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a long time. I didn't call anyone that night. I didn't text my brother. I didn't type an angry message and delete it. I just stood there, and then I finished making my pasta, and I ate it at my kitchen table alone. And something that had been soft in me for a long time went very, very quiet. The following Saturday, I went to brunch with my friend Diane, who I've known since college. She's a nurse, practical and plain-spoken, and she has never once told me what I wanted to hear when the truth was more useful. I told her everything. The checks, the venue deposit, the catering payment, the phone call on Tuesday, the capacity issue. Diane put her fork down. She said, "Maya, do you hear yourself?" I said I heard myself. She said, "You paid for the room and they didn't save you a seat in it." I said I knew. She said, "That's not a seating issue. That's a message." I drove home thinking about what she said. A message. My mother had told me not to take it personally, which is a thing people say when they know something is very personal. And the more I thought about it, the more I understood that I had been receiving this message for years. One small transmission at a time, and I had been choosing not to read it. The wedding was on a Saturday in May. I knew the exact time because I had helped coordinate the timeline. Ceremony at 4, cocktail hour at 5:30, reception at 7. I worked in my home office that afternoon. Quarterly filings. Client notes. The ordinary work of my ordinary Saturday. At 7:43, my cousin posted to Instagram a photo of the reception, the tables lit up, everyone in their best, my brother and Stephanie looking genuinely happy in the center of the frame. The caption was just a string of heart emojis and the word family. I looked at the photo for a while. I could see the floral centerpieces, white peonies and eucalyptus. I had sat at a table with Stephanie's mother for 2.5 hours one Sunday afternoon helping pick those out. I liked the photo. Then I typed a comment. I wrote, "Congratulations. The peonies look beautiful." I helped pick those, along with covering the venue deposit and catering. Enjoy every moment. I posted it and put my phone face down on the desk. I went back to my client files. 22 minutes later, my phone started ringing. My mother first, then Danny, then a number I didn't recognize that I later figured out was our Aunt Carol. Then Danny again. Then my mother again. 3 times in a row. I let them all go to voicemail. I checked Instagram. The post was gone. The comment was gone with it. I turned my phone over, set it to do not disturb, and finished my work. The following Monday, I had every intention of having a calm adult conversation with my brother once the wedding weekend had settled. I was prepared to be reasonable. I had even written some notes, things I wanted to say without my voice doing the thing it does when I'm trying not to cry. Then I got a letter. It came to my apartment, addressed to me, from a bank in South Carolina I had never done business with. It was a notice regarding a cosigner on a personal loan. The account was past due. As cosigner, I was being notified of collection activity. I read it 3 times. I called the bank's customer service line and spent 34 minutes on hold before reaching someone. I explained that I had received a notice and that I had no memory of co-signing any loan. The representative verified my name, my social security number, my date of birth. All matched. The loan had been opened 14 months earlier. The primary borrower was my brother. The loan amount was $22,000. It had been current for about 8 months and had been in default for the last 6. The representative asked if I would like to discuss repayment options. I said no. I'd like to understand how my signature got on this document. She said she couldn't speak to that and suggested I contact the branch where the loan originated. I thanked her, hung up, and sat completely still for probably 2 full minutes. Then I called my attorney. I have a personal attorney because about 4 years ago, a client dispute got complicated and a coworker suggested I stop assuming good intentions covered everything. Her name is Renee, and she is thorough and calm and not easily surprised. I told her what I had found. I told her about the loan, the amount, the timeline. I told her I had not signed anything. I told her about the wedding payments, the years of financial support, the phone call about the seating. Renee was quiet for a moment. She said, "Maya, this isn't a family misunderstanding. This is fraud." I said I knew. She said, "I need you to get a copy of the loan documents. Whatever signature they have on file, we need to see it." I requested the documents through the bank that week. The signature on the cosigner line was not mine. It was a reasonable imitation, someone who had seen my signature enough times to approximate it, but it was not mine. My handwriting has a specific way the capital M curves, something I've always been particular about. The signature on the document didn't have it. Renee filed a report with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. She also sent a formal dispute letter to the bank with a fraud affidavit. I did not call my brother before doing this. I did not call my mother to give anyone a chance to explain. Renee advised me that contacting them before the report was filed could compromise the documentation, and I trusted her more than I trusted whatever story would be waiting for me on the other end of that call. The police report was filed on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, Danny called me 14 times. I answered on the 15th. He didn't start with an apology. He started with a question. He said, "What did you do?" I said, "I filed a fraud report. Someone forged my signature on a loan document." He said, "Maya, I was going to tell you. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time." I said, "You had 14 months. He said, "Things got complicated. The job situation changed and Stephanie and I had the wedding costs and I didn't know how to bring it up." I said, "You could have asked me." He said, "You could have said no." I didn't answer that because I didn't know if he was wrong. He said, Can you call the police and tell them it was a misunderstanding? That you forgot you signed it?" I said, "I didn't sign it, Danny." He said, "Maya." I said, "I didn't sign it, Danny." He said, "Maya." I said, "I didn't sign it. And I'm not going to say I did." He said some things after that, not kind things. He said I was making it bigger than it needed to be. He said I was embarrassing the family. He said Stephanie's family was going to find out and it was going to humiliate everyone. I said, "I'm sorry that's stressful for you." He hung up. My mother called an hour later. She didn't bring up the fraud report directly. She asked me how I was doing, in that careful voice that means she knows exactly what she's calling about and is hoping I'll bring it up first so she doesn't have to. I let the silence sit. She said, "You know your brother didn't mean any harm." I said, "Mom, someone forged my name on a federal loan document." She said, "He was in a hard place. You know how he gets when things pile up?" I said, "I know." She said, "Do you think there's any way you could just let this one go? For the family?" I thought about the venue deposit, the catering check, the bridesmaid dresses, the rehearsal dinner, the 2.5 hours with the peonies. I said, "No, Mom, I don't think I can." She said, "You've always been the strong one, Maya." "I don't think I can." She said, "You've always been the strong one, Maya." I said, "I know." I hung up and didn't call back. What followed was not dramatic in the way I think people expect these things to be. It was mostly paperwork and waiting and long stretches of very ordinary life moving around something that required attention. Renee worked through the bank to have my name formally removed from the loan as a cosigner based on the fraud finding. The bank opened their own investigation. They were not particularly interested in protecting my brother. They were interested in the $22,000 that wasn't being paid. Danny hired an attorney through my parents, which meant my parents were paying for it, which was almost funny in a way I didn't laugh at. The investigation took about 3 months. The determination came back that the signature had been forged. My name was removed from the account. Danny remained the sole borrower on a defaulted loan. His wages were garnished. I found out through my cousin, not through anyone in my immediate family. I also, in that same period, stopped every automatic transfer I had been making to my parents. The monthly contributions to their mortgage. The buffer I kept available for their utility bills. The informal arrangement that had existed for 8 years and had never once been written down because I hadn't wanted to make it feel transactional. I sent my mother one text. I said, "I've had to redirect my finances while I work through the legal situation. I won't be able to continue the monthly support." She responded 3 hours later. She said, "I understand." That was the last thing she said to me for 4 months. Diane took me to dinner in August, a few months after everything had settled. A place in No Doubt with good oysters and better wine, and the kind of noise level that makes it easy to say hard things because no one nearby can really hear you. She asked me how I was actually doing. I thought about it before I answered. That's a thing I've been doing more, actually thinking before I answer, instead of reaching for whatever response makes the other person comfortable. I said, "I feel lighter." She said, "Yeah?" I said, "I spent so long being the person who handled things. I thought that was just who I was, but I don't think it was who I was. I think it was a role I kept filling because no one else would, and no one ever asked me to stop." She said, "Do you miss them?" I said, "I miss the family I thought we were." She reached across the table and just put her hand on mine for a second. Didn't say anything. That was enough. I still live in Charlotte. I still work at the same firm. I got a promotion in the fall, senior manager, which came with a salary increase that felt almost absurd given what I'd been sending home every month for the better part of a decade. I booked a trip to Portugal for January. Just me, 2 weeks, a city I'd been putting off visiting because there was always something that needed the money more. There wasn't a dramatic confrontation. There wasn't a scene where everyone gathered and I said the things I should have said. That's not how it went. It went quietly, the way a subscription you finally canceled just stopped showing up on your statement. My brother is working through his debt. I know this because our cousin keeps me loosely updated, not out of loyalty to anyone in particular, but because she's genuinely decent and thinks I should know. My parents are managing. They refinanced. They cut some things. They are doing what people do when the arrangement they had built around one person's willingness quietly ends. I don't call them. Sometimes I think I might, and then I sit with the feeling for a while, and it passes. I've thought a lot about what I would say if I did call. I've practiced different versions in my head. Some of them are angry. Some of them are sad. Most of them end the same way, with me wanting to be understood by people who have spent years not understanding me, which is maybe the thing I needed to let go of most. I kept the receipts. Every transfer, every check, every Venmo. Renee told me to keep them, and I do. Not because I'm planning anything. Just because, for a very long time, I let things happen without any record, and I don't do that anymore. The wedding photos are still up on my cousin's page. I scrolled past them once, the centerpieces bright in the venue light, and I didn't feel what I thought I would feel. I felt something quieter, something closer to finished than to sad. Somewhere in my things, I still have the brochure from the floral vendor. White peonies, eucalyptus, baby's breath. Elegant and understated, the vendor had said, classic. I remember thinking at the time that I had good taste. I still think so. The last thing I want to say, and I want to say it carefully because I think it matters, I don't tell the story to make my brother a villain or my mother a monster. I tell it because I spent a long time believing that love required me to make myself smaller and quieter and more available than I actually was. I believed that if I just kept filling the gap, eventually there would be enough. Enough gratitude, enough acknowledgement, enough reciprocity to make the gap feel worth it. There wasn't. There isn't a switch you flip. There isn't a single moment where everything becomes obvious. It's 100 small moments where you notice something doesn't add up, and you choose to do the math or you choose not to. I chose not to for a very long time. I don't know what my family's version of this story is. I'm sure it's different from mine. I'm sure in their version I overreacted, I escalated something that could have been handled quietly, I put legal machinery into motion over what was ultimately a family matter. Maybe they're not entirely wrong about that. But my name was on a loan I didn't sign. My money built a room I wasn't allowed to sit in. And when I finally stopped making myself available for both of those things, the world kept turning. Mine did. Theirs did too. I bought a small oil diffuser recently, cedar and eucalyptus. It runs on a timer in the morning, and when I wake up, the apartment smells like a version of somewhere peaceful. It's a small thing, but I chose it for myself, and nobody asked me to return it. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately. Not in a dramatic way, just the quiet, honest way you start to see patterns when enough time has passed and you're no longer standing in the middle of the thing. Every arrangement has a logic to it. Every dynamic holds together because the people inside it are each playing a role, usually without anyone agreeing out loud that this is what they're doing. My role was the one who handled things. And the arrangement held together for 8 years because I kept showing up to play it. That wasn't Danny's fault entirely. It wasn't my mother's. I walked back into that role every single time it opened up. And I told myself I was doing it out of love, which was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I also didn't know how to stop. I didn't know who I was in that family if I wasn't useful. And that's not a small thing to admit. It took a forged signature on a federal loan document for me to finally see what I'd been building. Not a family relationship, but a system where my willingness to give was treated as a resource to be managed, not a choice to be honored. That's the cause and effect part that matters. Not the fraud, not the wedding, not the comment I left on a photo that disappeared 22 minutes later. The real chain of events started years earlier. Every time I absorbed a cost without saying anything, every time I told myself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping the relationship, it wasn't. I was keeping a structure alive that depended on my silence. What I learned from Diane, from one honest conversation over eggs and coffee on a Saturday morning, is that the people who actually see you will tell you what they see, not to hurt you, because they respect you enough to say the hard thing. Renee did the same thing in her own way. She didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. She told me what the situation actually was. Those two women, in their different ways, showed me what it looks like when someone treats your time and your trust as something worth protecting. That's what I want to carry forward. Not bitterness. Not a lesson about cutting people off. Just a clearer understanding of the difference between generosity that comes from strength and giving that comes from fear of what happens if you stop. Strength looks like writing a check because you genuinely want to help, and you could walk away if you needed to. Fear looks like writing a check because you don't know what they'll think of you if you don't, and you've quietly built your sense of value around being needed. I was operating from the second place for a long time. I don't say that to be hard on myself. I say it because naming it clearly is the only way to actually change it. I'm in Portugal in January, just me, a city I've been putting off for years because something always needed the money more. Nothing needs the money more now. I need the money now. I need the 2 weeks now, and I'm not waiting for permission to take them. That's what it actually feels like to stop. Not like a door slamming. More like a window you finally open after a long winter. The air comes in and you realize you'd forgotten what it was supposed to feel like in there.